Hey guys, Ray here, and today I'm going to showcase my recommended league starters for new Path of Exile league Affliction. I would say there was like a huge meta shakeup that time, and some old builds that worked are not really working anymore, and some new ones will work even better, such as Diviner, for example. Let's look further into the list and what I can say about it. So the first in the row will be an Absolution build. Absolution was buffed in 3.23 Affliction, so right now your minions will have lower cooldown rates and it will feel better in terms of their abilities. You also can use Val Absolution if you will get it fast enough, and the minion from Val Absolution is pretty strong too, especially with the new cooldown bonuses. I would say the Absolution right now is a really strong starter. The tankiness of the build is really high for starter, mostly because you have a really big block chance in the most situations. You also got health, regeneration, and your minions will protect you in the most cases. The clear is not that amazing, but pretty decent, mostly because your minions auto-targeting all the enemies around you. The bossing is alright, and I would say the Absolution build right now can both pretty good, mostly because Sentinel of Radiance working really good for bossing, especially at the start. The Axe will be really amazing too, because Sentinel of Radiance is going to carry that as well. And the speed of the build is pretty much alright, mostly due to using Shield Charge, and with the Shield Charge you can move pretty fast because you don't have cooldowns. So overall, that's a pretty strong starter that got buffed in the Affliction League, and I think it will work really good that time. So Cobra Lash is in pretty good position this league as well. That's a pretty strong starter, mostly focused on the amazing clear. Due to the abilities that it used, mostly like returning projectiles and innate chaining, it can clear screens without any issue. So the tankiness of the build is not really high. It can still withstand some kind of damage, but unfortunately it's not that tanky. The clear is completely amazing, it's one of the best of the starters. It could be compared to other like bow builds. Bossing itself is not really good. I would say that Cobra Lash currently needs some time to adapt for single target and need cluster jewels for single target to feel better. And the speed of the build is pretty high as well. Due to an amazing attack speed, can clear and move really fast. So overall this option is pretty strong, mostly because it can zoom through the content and level and farm faster than other builds. Boneshatter build was one of the classics for past few leagues, and it's still working pretty good. There were like some changes to trauma, and because of that there could be some issues with the whole progression, but it still stays pretty strong. There's like two options with Slayer and Juggernaut, but I would say as a starter I would recommend Juggernaut instead, because I think it could be tankier, it could be easier to play overall, and you can stack more trauma. So I would say overall, the tankiness of the build is still really high. It's one of the tankiest starters along with Absolution. The clear is absolutely insane as well. You can just delete the screens with one click and it feels absolutely amazing. Talking about bossing, you can pretty much tank almost everything that the bosses can throw at you, so you will require a little more time to kill them. Overall, bossing should be alright. And the speed of the build is pretty high as well. I would say it's one of the highest because you can just jump around and click monsters, destroying them in seconds. So even after all the changes, I think Boneshatter will still be on top, and welcome to the Bone Zone if you are going to play it. So Divine Ire Totems is one of the new builds that will work in the Affliction League. Since Divine Ire getting a pretty significant buff, Divine Ire Totems will be a really good option for most of the cases and most of the league mechanics. The tankiness of the build should be pretty alright, mostly based on the way it kinda plays. You can just place your totems, go back, and totems will aggro monsters and they will pretty much kill them as well. The clear of the build is pretty good too. Unfortunately it's not that fast, but they can kill all the monsters around without any additional issues. The bossing capability is pretty high as well. Since the build can pretty much kill all the bosses, totems can tank the enemies, they will tank the bosses too, and they can do significant damage even if you are not too close to them and to the boss itself. you can't run too fast, you will need to place your totems, you will need to wait for them to attack, and all of that can pretty much lead to slower speed overall, especially if you focus on the mapping itself. As a unique items, the build pretty much uses Kikazaru's Tapas Ring, and also can use Soul Mantle Spider Silk. Considering that Soul Mantle is pretty costly at the league start, I would recommend to go for the 5 link instead of 6 link, and all the build footage was created with 5 link in mind as well. You also will need Self-Flagellation Viridian Jewel, and don't forget to take less curse effect from the tree as well, mostly to make sure that curses from your totems dying pretty much not doing anything to you. Otherwise, except from the Soul Mantle, the build should be pretty cheap and mostly based on rare items. Anyway, Divine Air Totems is going to be a really strong starter too, mostly because it's new, fresh and prominent. SRS is another minion-based build that should shine pretty good in the Affliction League. It was pretty popular starter before, and right now not a lot of things changed for it. It could be played as Necromancer, mostly to transition to other builds in the endgame, like Spectres and stuff like that. Overall, the tankiness of the build is pretty good, because you can block a lot of attacks, and you have minions to use as a mid shield in the most situations. The cleaver itself should be pretty high as well, mostly because your minions will run around and auto-target the enemies, so it will be harder to miss some of them. The boss in itself is pretty good too, and the build works as an all-rounder. That way it can do both bosses, clears and stuff like that on the decent quality, without going for one aspect against all of the others. Therefore, at the boss you will mostly need to dodge, spam your minions and wait until they kill them. The speed of the build is pretty good as well, mostly because you can still use really fast movement spells, and with them you can pretty much go through the whole maps while summoning your minions to kill monsters around you. It can also utilize Spectres early on, mostly for additional support buffs, and use Haste Aura to just be faster for your own character and your minions. It do not really require any unique items except Darkness Enthroned, which pretty much a basis for all minion builds right now, and shouldn't be too expensive even at the start of the league. That way SRS should be a really stable starter that could be really good with all different aspects of the game. So talking about the Reap, I would say it's a pretty good position as well. Roller Cash after the clarification seems alright and not really touched. You can get only one wand at the start, and after that you can pretty much go for Malachi's Loop as well, since it's pretty cheap. Badge of the Brotherhood is not really costing anything, and I think right now you will just need to buy one wand and the Roller Cash. So that way it's much less expensive, but it has a lot of damage and should work pretty good. So talking about the tankiness, unfortunately it's not that high even with Malachi's Loop. The block chance is pretty alright, but still kinda limited, and if you will tank monsters with your face, you could die in some situations. The clear of the build is pretty great considering we have AoE. Even with normal spell cascade, it should hit pretty well. The bossing potential of the build is really high, I would say, mostly because we can overlap even with the normal spell cascade, and that way we can hit one boss with a few rapes and reaching higher damage. Anyway, the build still needs a little time to ramp up the damage, so make sure you're attacking consistently. Talking about the speed, it's not very high as well, mostly because you need to attack the enemies that kinda in the distance, and it's closer to the Totem playstyle. It's not completely slow, but there's like a few changes to your speed which you can use. For example, if you are going to use Shield Charge, you will move much faster. The strongest part about the Reap is that it can pretty much scale really well into the endgame and reach up to 1 billion of damage, which is pretty huge. I will drop my Reap build video into the description, feel free to check it out if you are interested. Overall, Reap is pretty solid option right now and should be pretty strong starter. So, talking about honorable mentions, I would just want to showcase a few builds that I think will perform good as well, but I never tried them myself, at least in the last league, so I can be sure for it. Here's the list. Corrupted Furor Champion, I still think it's pretty strong. Toxic Rain Pathfinder was amazing, and I think it will pretty much follow the pattern. Lightning Arrow Deadeye should showcase how well both are going to perform in the new league. Explosive Arrow Elementalist will be really good as well, since it worked for so many leagues already. And Frostblade Trickster, I think it's pretty unusual but really fun option. So here it is, the honorable mentions list. I would say any of those will work pretty good as well. So that was my league starter list for 3.23 Affliction. I would say any of those builds will perform really good and should showcase pretty nice results both at the start on X and in later maps as well. You can pick any of them and hope you will have an amazing start. Please like and subscribe to the channel for more Path of Exile content, and see you next time.